Hi, welcome to my video. My name is Rachel. For those of you that are new here, I am an Australian artist and illustrator. I've worked as a commercial artist for about a decade. And today I just wanted to do a little bit of drawing and have a bit of a chat about what I do when I'm creatively stuck. I've been feeling like I'm in a little bit of a slump lately. I know there's a few things contributing to that. But today I wanted to talk about the 3 processes that I use to work through it. These are really basic, practical tips that you can use to sort of drag you through to the other side, kicking and screaming. It's just what works for me. There's so many different approaches to dealing with creative block. And I will highlight that one of the approaches I don't use is rest. I know a lot of people do recommend that if you're feeling creatively blocked, that you have a rest, that you take a break, just leave it alone. My theory with that is that when I feel like I'm creatively stuck, it's usually, or burned out even, it's usually not as a result of having worked too hard, but having worked too hard on the wrong thing. So say you're doing a lot of commission work or commercial work, you're working under someone else's direction, especially at the moment for those of us who share our work on social media, you might be trying to produce work that has to do with trying to please others rather than what you really want to do for yourself. So doing that kind of work, I think, leads to a lot of burnout. But if we can replace that with the work that really stokes your fire and really reinvigorates your creative practice, then I think that's the answer more than actually taking a break or stepping away or stopping your work. Because for me, consistency in creative practice is one of the biggest strengths and the biggest drivers against getting blocked. Creativity is like a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets, the better your ideas get, and the more ideas sort of show up for you. So I feel like having a rest, and again, this is what works for me, but having a rest is sometimes a bit disruptive to your creative practice instead of constructive. But anyway, that's just how I feel about rest. Let's jump in with the first of the practices that I want to talk about today, which is working within your comfort zone. So when it comes to working within your comfort zone, the way I think this works is you can sort of try and do something that you can capably and easily do. There's not that much resistance between what you're trying to do and what you can achieve, and it gives you a little bit more confidence every time that you sort of show yourself that you can do the work, you can show up, you can produce something. You get a little bit more self-confidence, and that really feeds into your ability to do the work. You know, after a lifetime of drawing and a decade of doing this professionally, I still sit down sometimes and just think, I can't do this. I think a lot of that comes from comparison, overwhelm, just there's so much information coming at us all the time, so much beautiful work to look at online. And I think sometimes we just think, I'm not good enough for this. But if you can work within your comfort zone, then you start to unlock and get the ball rolling, and I think that's a really important part of overcoming creative block. So my go-to is always just to draw some mushrooms, smiley suns, things that are really simple and easy. These are things that you will commonly see appear in my work. There's flowers, eyes, hands, horses, things that I am comfortable with and accustomed to drawing. So my theory with this kind of thing is if you're doing something that's not going to make you feel discouraged or frustrated or overwhelmed, but you are doing something, and that sense of achievement action then feeds your self-belief and your confidence. If you're like me, it's possible to get stuck or kind of stupefied by the belief that we're not good enough to create meaningful work. So this one is really good for those of us who have a little bit of trouble with self-doubt or feel a little bit wobbly in our self-confidence, in our creative skills. I just think, you know, if you are feeling those kind of emotions or something is worrying you, taking tangible action is always the best way to sort of combat that. So by doing work you know you can do or you know how to do, you sort of take one step to feeling more empowered and more able to do the work. Okay, on to practice number 2. This is working within limitations. So this addresses the whole intimidating blank page thing, when you sit down and it's staring back at you and you don't know what to do. I experience this a lot with when I'm really busy with commercial work or life stuff, and I have all these ideas about things that I'm going to work on as soon as I get some free time. then I do get free time and all of a sudden I have a completely blank mind. Can't think of anything to do. So a good way to combat this is working within parameters. So setting boundaries or limitations on how you're going to work. This could take the form of prompt lists, specific mediums, color schemes, any kind of thing which narrows down the options of what you're going to do. So in this little example, I've chosen to use a prompt list. Now, they're available everywhere online. Lots of people do them around October, Inktober. Sian from Very Little Peach does really cool ones each year. They're really well considered and creative and such a cool thing to do. So with the page that I've worked on, now admittedly it didn't come out really how I wanted. I wasn't super happy with it, but I've used a prompt list and focused on a limited color palette, which is something that I like to do in my work anyway. But here I chose to just work in blue, which I don't think was a great choice. But anyway, the more important thing is getting the work down, I think, more than anything, and just getting the ball rolling and going some direction. It's better than no direction. So when we're talking about working within limitations, I think you can look at something that Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, said. Art is not about thinking something up, it is the opposite, getting something down. That, in my mind, is if you're working within these limitations, you're going to get something down. You've written a list for what you're going to do and you're just going to have to go ahead and do it. And in that practice of putting something down, you're going to either get out the way of something that's not very good, which is I think what I did with this page, or you're going to capture something that is good, which will fuel you to do more and to be confident to do more. Of course, this kind of exercise is really temporary. You don't have to keep sticking to those limitations or keep working that way. If creativity comes back to you and you really get the ball rolling, then I would just run with that and sort of forget about the limitations and the kind of exercises that you were working on. You just go ahead and do things the way that you like to do them. And these are really practical, specific exercises that you can do if you're feeling stuck, but you can really apply this concept more broadly. It can be anything that makes it easier for you to work. So working without expectations or judgments, or maybe the bar is just that you have to make a single mark on the page or draw for 5 minutes only. Something that's infinitely manageable. Maybe it's a repetitive drawing. Maybe you just work off prompts or to a theme. Maybe you work in mono, you create a bunch of blobs and draw them into things. You could compile a list of drawing requests or do variations on a letter or a phrase or draw the same thing in various styles. Really just about reducing the barriers for starting and making it easier on yourself to begin, to get in the flow and just to keep going. Because the last thing that I'm going to talk about is really the most important part of being creative and making creative work and improving and growing. Okay, so number 3, it's consistently showing up. This is the most frustrating and infuriating of all of the practices that I'm going to talk about today, but I think it's the most important. So showing up day after day and just doing the work, the active opposite of rest. It's frustrating and infuriating because it works. It's simple and it's obvious, but it's not easy, is the problem with consistency. I have seen this in every area of my life. Where I show up consistently, I see improvement. Unfortunately, the area where I'm most consistent is in inconsistency. So I find it really hard to stick to things like that. But when we can, I think it's the most powerful thing. So the art of showing up consistently is why successful or talented people seem really special to us, because they've learned how to muscle through that boredom or procrastination or resistance. And it really, really is just showing up when you don't feel like it and showing up when you're tired. And I'm not a proponent at all of like hustle culture or, working yourself to the bone. But I think we always have to question our excuses and question when we're being lenient on ourselves and try and show up and do the work as much as we possibly can. And I think the consistency thing is especially rewarding with creativity or, with a creative practice, because the more you turn up, the more ideas come to you, the more easily they come, and just the better flow that you have in your work. So I really like this quote from Steven Pressfield, which is, "She, the artist, the writer, doesn't wait for inspiration. She acts in the anticipation of its apparition," which is the same as saying luck needs to find you working. Inspiration needs to find you working too. So when that idea comes, you need to be at your desk, in your sketchbook, practicing your work in order to capture it, I guess. All right, that's my top 3 for trying to get out of a creative block or creative slump. I hope you found this useful, and thank you so much for tuning in.